Hey guys, this is CJ Martin and Julien for Invictus. We want to talk today about application of Strongman into your everyday training. There are a couple reasons that we do Strongman with all of our athletes. One is because we do have elements of Strongman that show up at the CrossFit Games. But more importantly, I think, is the application to everyday training and how we use it to address asymmetries and how we use it to keep athletes healthy just throughout the season. So you want to touch on that, Julien?
Yes, yeah, it's very important to understand the difference that at the games there will be some strongman events, but we use at Invictus for everybody, we use strongman more as for the movements that they actually for the sake of just being good at strongman. That's not really the point. We use the strongman movements to make sure we use all planes of movement possible and all types of grip possible. Like sometimes in CrossFit, either the grip is not used as much as it should be, or certain planes of movement are being not necessarily avoided, but maybe not as touched as much as they should be. So that's why I like the strongman movement so much. They allow us to hit certain planes we would not necessarily otherwise use with a barbell.
Right.
And then there's also the point of awkward lifting. Like we always talk about functional fitness all the time. There is not really, life doesn't have leverage like this. Like life is mostly awkward lifting, and strongman movement prepare us better for this when you're carrying the groceries, basically. This is not really what the barbell is for. That's more like farmer's walk, picking up a baby, picking up your kids. All this is more toward awkward lifting. So we think like the strongman type movements help us better, making you like fitter, in a functional sense, and also healthy because you get to have all those planes of movement being worked into the programming.
Right. And just to give an example of that, we talk about the grip use, but if we think about the barbell, almost everything is pronated grip, right? And when we go into pull-ups, it's also pronated grip. And so we've seen some athletes with some problems around the elbow, and when we start incorporating some pulling, so things that we might do are hand over hand pulling.
My favorite.
So maybe talk about that, kind of how we just get this in order to create more movement patterns.
Yeah, because you see like for example, pull-ups, the bar, kettlebell swing, everything in CrossFit is done pronated, thumb facing each other. And when you work only like this, you create the entire muscle structure with only the radius turn a certain way. That has a tendency to lock all these parts in only one function, basically. And so strongman movement allows us to work in neutral or even supinated, which is very important because then all the muscles of the forearms and the arms have to be able to work throughout the full range of motion. And so between the farmer's walk allows neutral, and then that's why I like the rope pull so much. It allows you to work supinated, so thumbs facing out instead of thumb facing in. And if you look like when you work like this, the lats work a certain way. In supinated, you have a tendency to engage the lats in a different way. Same thing as neutral. The shoulder will not work the same. The traps will not be activating the same way. So it's very important to hit all three types of grip strength, and in order to make sure that all this works correctly, which would put less pressure on the elbow, less pressure on the shoulder, make you basically a healthier athlete. And we've seen a humongous difference amongst not just CrossFit athletes, but like everybody, just by incorporating all those little things we don't do necessarily just with a barbell or with gymnastic movements.
Would you talk just real quick, one last point on kind of how we've used some of the strongman? We've seen people squat, and it's really common. You guys have seen this in your own gyms. People squat and they have a tilt to one side. And a lot of times we find that that's a problem more with like lat engagement.
Lat engagement.
Right? And so talk about how we've kind of addressed some of that in the most simple way possible.
Yes. Like, for example, one of the things we saw was the problem with the obliques, right? The only time we ever worked the obliques in CrossFit really is like the anti-rotation movement is a split jerk. The split jerk is only on one leg, because obviously when you want to go very heavy, you're always going to favor the same strong side. So now that means you have one oblique that is somewhat strong, the other one that is basically never used. And that creates a tremendous problem, because now one side of the structure cannot hold the weight correctly. So we see that a lot on the squat, where people unrack the weight and then they're going to start tilting on one side. It comes from the fact that just one side of your body is not as strong as the other, and so the structure of one side of your body is not as strong. And that relates to tremendous problem on something like the squat, but we'll see it on the snatch, and then we'll see it on many, many different movements. So it was very important for us to balance the athletes out. And so we use the strongman movement for that as well, to make sure the core, the obliques, is engaged properly through the sandbag carries we do a lot of. Again, back to overhead yoke carries back to farmer carries, basically making sure we balance the weak side and the strong side to make sure that not only one side is being trained at a very high level of intensity and volume. So it's very important to balance all this, even within the programming. And strongman movement allow us to do this without having an exercise specifically for a muscle group. Right. And so it's far more efficient and far more functional.
And the barbell allows for a lot of compromise, but you know, the strongman doesn't always, right? And so we get a lot of this engagement, but it's a lot easier to tell an athlete, hey, I want you to take a sandbag for a walk around the block, than it is to sit and try to do a bunch of PT exercises and try to get them to engage.
Yes, and they're somewhat boring, and it requires a lot of coaching because those are very, sometimes with a barbell, necessarily higher skill movements, whereas as a finisher, a great way to do it is get a sandbag, go around the block. It's low skill, it's low eccentric, you know how to carry a sandbag, that's, you know, it's mankind know how to do that, and it's like, go work, and your body will respond very quickly to this because it's a low skill movement that you understand right away, instead of having need to be taught like over and over and over again how to do this with a barbell. A sandbag will allow you to get to the root of the issue right away, and after that it's just like being tough enough to walk around the block with it, which is easier said than done, but it works.
Yeah. So make sure you're incorporating some strongman into your program at home. If you need some ideas, check out the Invictus Athlete Strongman program that Julien writes for us, and I think you'll get a great benefit out of it.